an architecture media podcast supported by the Australian Institute of Architects, produced on Boonwurrung country.
Welcome to Design Speaks Weekly, a podcast that explores the biggest stories in Australian architecture and design. I'm your host, Georgia Burks, and today I speak with renowned Indigenous designer, author and filmmaker Alison Page about the growing interest in country-led design and who or what is benefiting from this approach. But first, here's the latest news headlines from Architecture AU.
In the news this week, federal environmental authorities have cleared Brisbane's 63,000-seat Olympic Stadium at Victoria Park. The decision also covers the planned National Aquatics Centre at the nearby Centenary Pool site in Spring Hill, meaning both projects can now proceed without further federal environmental assessment. And Melbourne-based firm Kirsten Thompson Architects has revealed plans for a $250 million mixed-use development in Adelaide's Forestville. The 3.6-hectare project will include a market hall, 2 apartment buildings, townhouses and short-stay accommodation, marking the firm's first major project in Adelaide. Those are the headlines for this week. For the full stories and more news, visit architectureau.com. I'm Adair Winder. It's Tuesday, May 12.
Alison Page is a proud Walbanga and Wadi Wadi woman and undoubtedly a design entrepreneur. Whether it was through collaboration with Dillon, Kombumerri and Kevin O'Brien at the Merrima Aboriginal Design Unit, or to 8 years as a panellist on the ABC's The New Inventors, or to founding the National Aboriginal Design Agency, Alison has consistently brought First Nations knowledge and culture to the centre of the Australian design conversation, no matter the project. In the lead up to her latest exhibition opening at the Melbourne School of Design as part of Melbourne Design Week, I spoke with Alison about the growing interest in Indigenous design and the complexities and opportunities that come with it. Hello, Alison, and welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Georgia. Thanks for having me.
Alison, you've been practicing design for 25 years now and have witnessed a growing momentum of interest in First Nations design, craft, and art in the built environment. Who or what do you think is benefiting the most from this interest? Is it country, communities, clients, or someone or something else?
Wow, that's a great question. I think the whole of Australia, is experiencing what I would call this amazing cultural inheritance that First Nations culture gives to all of us. You know, I've always sort of said, I think my work has always been quite obsessed with defining the Australian identity, because I don't think it's very well drawn. I don't think it's very well drafted. I think it's still forming for a lot of us. And I think that with a greater understanding of Aboriginal culture beyond the sort of beautiful dot paintings on the wall, people are starting to learn that what is behind the stories that are being told in those paintings is this vast array of deep ecological knowledge and cultural knowledge that has led to the successful survival of our people on this continent for over 65,000 years through major climatic change. So, in a way, what has happened with designing with country is that all of that ecological knowledge, that library of the dreaming, is now kind of making its way into the decisions that we make around the built environment. And obviously the grown environment as well, like all of our natural landscapes. But we as Aboriginal people see the built environment as an extension of how we see country. And so I think that is what's transforming the practice of architecture and design in Australia today.
When we're thinking about the future of Australia, and I guess just the climate in general, we can learn a lot from this ancient knowledge and really define the identity of Australia today as well. And sort of speaking about the growth that we're seeing in this interest of designing with or for country, you know, we're at the stage where supply is perhaps not meeting demand in terms of the numbers of Indigenous architects and designers. And, you know, that comes with its advantages and disadvantages. In your role at the National Aboriginal Design Agency, you oversee partnerships between Aboriginal artists and clients. How are you navigating this demand while also protecting Indigenous intellectual property?
So I actually started the National Aboriginal Design Agency like back in 2010, I think it was. I'm not there anymore, but I do continue to work with, I guess, all of my work throughout my whole practice over the last 25 years has been extremely collaborative. I think because we have this expansive view of our practice, it's never just about, oh, okay, I'm doing an interior design project, or I'm doing an architecture project, or I'm designing a water play area, you know, or whatever it is. I think we, as Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, we're always kind of seeing it as this way of activating country and this way of bringing people together and bringing communities together. And so there's always this kind of quadruple bottom line. We're fighting for the environment, but we're also there for socially responsible design. We're there for cultural integrity and elevating the cultural life of any city or any place. And we're also there for economic justice as well. So I think, you know, it is an expansive kind of view. So when we're kind of, I guess, sitting down at that first meeting with a blank sheet of paper and we've got people around the room and we're sort of thinking about that design output, I think we start with this idea that design can be an act of power, that design can be this really powerful decision-making process where we can bring these other values to bear, these cultural values to bear that can benefit everyone. So I sort of see my role in any project really about facilitating those conversations from the get-go. And there are people, I guess, that want you to kind of just stick to your, like, we're just designing this building or we're just designing this small project here. I'm always dragging them kicking and screaming into this kind of more meta narrative, which is about the future and how we can create more social cohesion, greater economic justice, all those things, and regenerating country.
People are interested in how they can be a part of that and think in that way. And from my perspective as an editor, we've been noticing more public and civic projects claiming to embed country or First Nations narratives in their designs without an Indigenous collaborator or leader credited or involved. And so my question is, and I think we probably both know this, but I'm interested, can a project truly be country-centred without Indigenous voices guiding it?
I think, and it's a great question because it's something I know that Dillon Kombumerri was kind of grappling with when they were formulating the Connecting to Country framework in the New South Wales Government Architect's Office. And I think you can have, say if you're designing a home, I think, and you either design it yourself or you bring on an architect to design it, I think you can still design with country to a degree in terms of responding to the prevailing winds, the sun direction, you know, just great environmental design principles, right? Which is still, to a degree, designing with country. But yeah, I think it's and you know, we want everyone to do that. We do. We want every house to do some heavy lifting in that space. I think even on a home level, though, there are ways in which you can actually engage with local artists. You can tell stories of country. You can tell stories of place. And I think we'll see probably a lot more of that in the future as Aboriginal designers start to create more products that people can buy for their own homes and things like that. But they will be authentic products designed by Aboriginal people. They might be Australian manufactured. They might even use sustainable materials and so on. And so I think there is definitely a place for more of that so that people can kind of do that work on their own in a more expanded way. And they're not ringing up the local traditional owners and kind of annoying them because they're designing a house over in Hunters Hill. So there's that. But I think, yeah, once the project starts to get sort of to a scale where you actually are being asked to sort of implement the Connecting to Country framework and actually design with country, you definitely need to involve the communities of country, the people who speak for country, the traditional owner groups, and any communities of interest as well. Like you might be designing a hospital on that country, so you might need to engage with Aboriginal health practitioners and subject matter experts that relate to the type of development that you're doing. Obviously, the more successful projects are the ones that have engagement with community on that level. And then I think there's an even more elevated sort of most ideal project is when you are engaging with country, you're engaging with traditional owners, you're engaging with the subject matter experts, but you're also Indigenous design led. So the translation of, the storytelling or the regeneration of country, those conversations that are had with community are had between First Nations people. And it's a holistic approach. So I think that's kind of, what we're all working towards. I'm really enjoying at the moment working with a number of different design teams where I'm just a provocateur, really. I'm helping the architects and designers reach those kind of translation conclusions, but it's even better when I'm co-designing with them.
And you're challenging them to think differently or unlearn and what they've kind of always sort of done in terms of a process and relearn a new way that will benefit all of us, including.
That's right. And it takes time. And also, like you look at architects like Kevin O'Brien, they've been practicing, for such a long time, decades, really. And so there's nothing that can beat that. Or Jifa Greenaway, there's nothing that can beat that in terms of actually having a lead architect or a lead landscape designer, someone like Jordan Eaton, or, like actually driving and leading both from understanding, having that traditional knowledge as well as having that technical knowledge of our craft, which is, architecture and design.
The design decisions that they're making.
They come from a different lens, and this is the thing. I think back to your first question, Georgia, when you said, how transformational really is this and who's benefiting? I think what is really great about the Connecting to Country framework and how it's transforming our industry is that it's shaking up the architecture world in Australia, which is largely made up of upper middle class white people who, are wealthy enough, first of all, to even have an understanding of what design is, to be exposed to it as a young person, and to then sort of make that leap and say, oh, well, I want to go and be an architect, or I want to go and be a designer. And that's why, at UTS, I've started the Indigenous Institute for Designing with Country, because I want kids from Hauso to be designing public housing, because that's when we'll really see some really interesting design solutions, because they have that, when we talk about human-centered design, it's the people who have lived it that are actually making those decisions and that are driving kind of innovation in that space, I think.
good design should be for everyone, which means it probably should be designed by everyone who's got different lived experiences, you know. It always goes back to education for me, I think, you know, the access to education, access to then the education of architecture and design. That's hard to get into. We need more of us in this space. So going back to those roots and how we can sort of encourage young First Nations kids to come and be part of this as a career is an exciting thing to think about. And I don't know how we tap into those spaces, but hopefully we do. You've long advocated for Indigenous design excellence across various mediums, so like including film, public art and exhibitions that provide that access. And, you know, your upcoming exhibition for Melbourne Design Week continues that message that you've sort of had throughout your career. And this one in particular invites visitors into an educational space called House of Black Studio, which, you know, people can come in and make and yarn. Why is this interactive and inclusive approach to sharing the story of Indigenous design excellence important to you?
The House of Black Studio and the inclusion of it in the exhibition is incredibly important because it's kind of that third space, if you like, where I want to continue the dialogue and I want to continue the ideation of where this designing with country can go. This exhibition, it's a retrospective of my work and it's called Creative Shapeshifter. And the reason why it is called that and why I think Melbourne University and Melbourne Design School really wanted to do this retrospective work is because I have worked in so many different genres. Like I've really moved from, I studied interior design, but then I sort of moved into doing jewellery design. And then I started a Aboriginal arts organisation and the National Aboriginal Design Agency. So I got into doing festivals and things like that. And then I went into theatre design, film. I worked on architecture projects and, you know, with Merrima Architecture and others and doing public art as well. And then, you know, the House of Black is almost kind of this return back to that really beautiful sort of storytelling practice that interior design, I think, lends itself to. But of course, you know, this is 25 years later, where 25 years ago when I started, and you'll be at the start of the gallery where you'll just see it was a completely different world. You know, this was when the history wars were being fought and Howard was in power. And so, you know, you weren't even allowed to really talk about Australia's true history. And to see the transformation of Australia through that time, and we actually map like some of the major milestones of what's going on in Australia at the time, because you can kind of see this correlation with my practice, where it just starts to really flourish at a time when Australia starts to really embrace reconciliation and is becoming interested in Australia's true history. I did a whole series of works around Captain Cook and the landing of Captain Cook on my community in La Perouse. And so now it's so excellent right now, and this is what the House of Black really is about, is I want to sort of work with other artists to really engage in making and manufacturing and making custom interior design elements, not only for people's home, but for major developments where we actually take some of the tactile elements within a project. It could be the lighting, the furniture, the door handles, the doors, you know, and really invite that to be a surface for place-based storytelling. And that it could be Australian made and it could be kind of, I really honestly believe that Australia is about to have a bit of an arts and crafts movement because economically it's starting to really stack up now to actually have some of these things custom made than to shipping them from overseas. And I think this handmade quality to our design spaces, I think we'll see a lot more of it.
And I guess that inclusive approach in this exhibition and bringing people into that space almost, would you say, gives people the confidence that they can be a part of that potential arts and crafts movement that's about to happen?
Oh, absolutely. This is the time for Australia to step up and define itself in a way that it hasn't ever before, where we collectively, we have Indigenous storytellers working with new Australians who are makers and storytellers themselves, and we start weaving together these stories of place that not only include this deep history, but also kind of imagine this really vibrant future for ourselves that involves everyone. I'll give you an example. I just designed the water play area at Sydney Fish Markets. It's called Land of the Giant Pippies, and it's these giant pippies that are kind of coming out of the public realm. I did it with Aspect Studio in the design of the public space there. But one of the important aspects of it, and what I'm getting more and more interested as I practice, is how those spaces are activated. So I'll be working with Placemaking New South Wales to do a Pippi cook-off where we invite people from different cultures to come and bring their best Pippi recipe. We all get the same stock ingredients, but you might have exo Pippis, or you might have Pippi Bongali, or our
Yum.
Aboriginal communities. I know. And we in our communities, as you would know, Georgia, we love our Pippi curry. And so we might have a few Aboriginal families from around New South Wales battling it out. And it's just, I guess it's those kind of events really that really foster social cohesion. But from an Indigenous perspective, it's about activating the artwork. So the reason why I put House of Black Studio there is because it's never about static environments. We're not about static environments. We always animate our artifacts with ceremony. So in the same way we do that with like a boomerang or a kulaman or, a yidaki, I really see interior spaces or public spaces in the same way. It's like, okay, well, what ceremonies can we do to bring this to life, to activate it, to awaken the spirit of country and bring people together?
And we need that now more than ever, I think, at this moment in time. Alison, to end our episode, what is something that you've changed your mind about?
I am 51 years old now, and I've been practicing for a really long time. And you'll see as part of this exhibition that I have had this very eclectic career that's moved in lots of different directions. I have always had this niggling voice in the back of my head that I should stay in my lane and that I should just stick to one thing, but I have changed my mind about that. I think convergence is the future. And I think the more that we bring together different art forms and different art practices and different technical skills into all of our work, I think the more creative it's going to be.
Completely agree, Alison. The more the merrier, Thank
Yeah,
you so
right.
much for joining me today on the podcast.
Thank you, Georgia.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode, which is supported by the Australian Institute of Architects. If you're enjoying this podcast, be sure to subscribe, share, or leave a rating. I'm Georgia Burks, and this has been Design Speaks Weekly. Design Speaks Weekly is produced on Boonwurrung country. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and recognise their continuing connection to land, waters, and culture.